The sun pressed down like judgment, turning every inch of Red Hollow into a furnace. Dust rose in wavering heat waves, curling in the air like smoke, and the town held its breath under the oppressive glare. In the center, suspended from a rough timber post, was a woman whose wrists had been bound high above her head. Her white dress, once pristine, was torn and marred with ochre dust, and the dark stains of old blood. Around her neck, a crude wooden sign swung gently in the wind, the words painted in harsh black letters, Cowboy Land. The townspeople watched from shadowed porches, their faces hard, unreadable, approval hidden in their silence. Not a single bird chirped, not a child cried. Her name was Elara, though none here had ever dared speak it. Her struggle had long ceased, only the faint trembling of her arms betrayed that she still clung to life. Then, through the shimmering dust, a lone rider appeared, a man who belonged to the edges of the horizon itself. His horse's hooves muffled by powdery dirt, he advanced slowly, deliberately, taking in the entire scene without haste. Sunlight glinted off the leather of his saddle, his worn coat tracing the contours of a body carved by wind, sun, and solitude. His eyes scanned the post, the woman, the silent witnesses. And in that instant, the quiet of Red Hollow shattered. The town, unprepared for such intrusion, seemed to shrink back. The weight of inevitability hung in the air as Jonah, the man who would change everything, stepped forward. Every motion measured, every thought contained. There would be no speeches, no negotiation, only a knife, a rope, and the determination to rewrite fate itself. Jonah's boots sank into the dry dust as he dismounted, a calm presence in a town paralyzed by heat and fear. He did not glance at the crowd, nor did he acknowledge Marshal Carter, who stepped forward from the saloon's shadow with an air of authority. Jonah's gaze was fixed solely on the post, and the woman suspended from it. Elara's wrists bore the swollen marks of cruel binding, raw and angry, the rope cutting into the delicate skin. Her body sagged, exhausted, fragile. Slowly, he reached for the knife at his belt, the steel catching the unforgiving sun, reflecting a sliver of cold fire. The townspeople held their breath, the murmurs of expectation barely escaping lips pressed together in fear and awe. With one fluid motion, Jonah cut the rope. The tension snapped like lightning. Elara collapsed into the dust, limbs limp and head bowed, yet the faint flicker of life remained. Jonah lifted her carefully, assessing the weight of her fragile body, as if holding a bundle of hope. Placing her gently onto his horse, he mounted behind her, one firm arm securing her waist against his chest. Marshal Carter stepped forward, the faintest edge of authority in his voice. "That's town business, Jonah." Jonah finally turned to meet the marshal's gaze, eyes pale as a winter sky, unwavering and resolute. "Not anymore," he said, and without another word, he spurred the horse forward. Dust clouded the town's main street as he rode out, leaving behind the swinging rope, the empty post, and a silence that spoke louder than any protest. Red Hollow had witnessed the end of one sentence and the beginning of another, and the town would remember it for years, though no one would dare speak of what they saw. Elara awoke to the scent of pine and dry earth, disoriented by the unfamiliar softness of the cabin bed beneath her. Cold panic gripped her chest, fingers trembling as she flexed her raw wrists. Pain lanced through her arms where the rope had bitten deepest, scar tissue beginning to form under the thin layer of healing skin. She pushed herself upright, heart hammering, eyes scanning the small room illuminated by a single window, a narrow beam cutting through the dust-laden air. Jonah sat at a wooden table, back to her, meticulously repairing a strip of leather with hands that moved as if every motion had been carved into memory by years of labor and solitude. Elara's mind raced, instinct screamed to flee, yet the vastness beyond the door offered no refuge, only the endless horizon of sun-scorched rocks and scrubland. Her bare feet hit the cool wooden floor as she stumbled to the door, fingers fumbling with the latch. "Doors not barred," Jonah said in a low, measured tone, like stones grinding against each other. The sound of his voice was calm, unhurried, terrifyingly certain. She flung it open and stepped into the glaring sunlight, the desert stretching endlessly, a cruel expanse that promised nothing but heat and isolation. Her lungs burned, legs strained, and yet, she kept running, driven by the raw need for freedom. Hours later, she collapsed, gasping, sweat and dust mingling on her skin. No footsteps followed, only silence. Eventually, she rose and returned to the cabin, drawn by the quiet presence of Jonah in the doorway. On the porch step, waiting, was a tin cup of water and a shallow bowl of broth. He had left her a choice, and she understood. In this world, survival came with uncertainty, but also with the first fragile taste of trust. Days passed in the rhythm of cautious observation. Jonah never crowded her, leaving Elara space while leaving provisions outside the cabin. She spent hours twisting the small red silk cord hidden in her dress seam, the last tangible memory of her husband, of the life she had lost. The wound on her wrists scabbed slowly, purple and angry at first, then pale and soft as new skin emerged. One evening, Jonah stumbled while carrying a heavy armful of firewood, the logs crashing in a cacophony that shattered the usual quiet. Elara's reaction was unexpected, a choked, small laugh that escaped despite her instinct to flee. Jonah looked up from the woodpile, startled, and for the first time, allowed a faint, weary smile to touch his lips. The storm came suddenly, a violent summer downpour that turned the dry land into mud and rivers, wind rattling the cabin and lightning slicing across dark clouds. Inside, lantern light flickered on rough wooden walls, painting Jonah's focused expression as he cleaned his rifle. Elara sat on the cot, knees drawn to her chest, fingers working the red cord. "He promised me a garden," she whispered, voice raspy and hesitant. Jonah did not respond directly. Instead, he observed, silent, steady, a quiet anchor amidst the storm. Outside, the world raged, but inside, an unspoken bridge formed between two wounded souls, survival, grief, and the tentative beginnings of connection. A week later, Marshal Carter returned, flanked by 2 armed riders, the sun casting their long shadows across the dusty ground. "We've come for what's ours," Carter announced, spitting into the dirt with the authority of the town behind him. Jonah stood firm, his body a barricade of defiance, voice flat but unwavering. "She's not property," he said. "She's a person." The standoff escalated rapidly. A rider lunged for the cabin door, where Elara hid. Jonah intercepted him with a punch that sent the man staggering into dust. Another rider swung a rifle but at Jonah's shoulder. Pain exploded across his body, but he did not fall. He struck again, precise and deadly. Elara screamed, fear and fury colliding as she helped steady Jonah after the last blow. Blood ran down his face and soaked his shirt, yet his resolve did not waver. Carter barked a final threat. "We'll be back, with more men." They rode off, leaving Jonah leaning against the cabin wall, breathing heavy, wounded but unbroken. Elara rushed to him, no longer timid, hands moving with purpose. She washed blood from his cuts, pressed wild herbs into open wounds, tore a strip of her dress to bind his side. "You saved me," Jonah rasped, voice rough with gratitude. Elara shook her head, dark eyes meeting his. "We saved us," she whispered, and in that simple declaration, roles reversed. Fear transformed, and trust, fragile but unshakable, was forged in the crucible of violence and survival. Time passed like a slow wind across the frontier. Elara grew stronger each day, learning to split wood, tend the small patch of garden, and read the skies for signs of weather or travelers. Jonah, confined by wounds but vigilant, taught her with quiet patience. Together, they reinforced the cabin, boarded windows, and ensured that nothing could surprise them again. One morning, Jonah retrieved the old post that had once held the cruel sign. He painted over the black letters, and in careful, deliberate strokes, wrote, "Elara's Garden." The surveyor from the railroad arrived weeks later, maps and money in hand, offering a line that cut through their land. Jonah looked at Elara's eyes, flickering with fear of displacement. Calmly, he set the map aside. "It's not for sale," he said. The railroad eventually curved around the granite ridge behind their homestead. Years passed. Roses climbed the porch, the garden flourished, and the once broken dog slept in sun patches undisturbed. Jonah and Elara aged together, lines of hardship etched into faces now softened by shared laughter. Their small cabin stood as a testament. Love and resilience could carve a home from even the harshest land. Where hatred once hung from a rope, life now bloomed. Where fear once reigned, trust and hope endured. They had survived, healed, and finally built a home, not just of wood and earth, but of courage, connection, and unspoken vows.